If you think about it, a user who's, checking out of a website, you have a good moment to offer them a VIP club of the website or offer them some kind of benefits club.
Okay, welcome back to the Marketing Playbook presented by Extend and Ebo. Here you'll take away 3 game-winning marketing plays every episode to take back to your team. I'm your host, Mark Friedman, and my career has been focused on direct-to-consumer marketing, direct mail, physical retail, and digital commerce. This is episode number 121, and my guests are Ned MacPherson and Rob Jewell. The idea behind the show is to help brands identify ways that they can use to drive additional revenue and profits to their brands while they are dealing with tariff increases and other rising costs. Before we get started, a quick thank you as always to Max Brandstetter of the Wild Business Growth Podcast for producing this episode. You can reach him at max@maxpodcasting.com to help bring your podcast to life. Let's open the playbook. Ready, break. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the Marketing Playbook podcast. Today, I'm joined by 2 guests, Ned MacPherson and Rob Jewell. Ned, who's the Chief Growth Officer and a principal at Power Digital, has been on this podcast with me not long ago, and his comments resonated so well with the listeners that I asked him back to discuss how brands can make some changes to help offset cost increases that they're experiencing due to the tariff situation. And Rob is a seasoned digital advertising expert with over 25 years of experience and more than $1 billion in optimized ad spend on platforms like Facebook and Instagram. As the CEO and founder of Uptick, he helps e-commerce brands unlock new revenue streams through post-purchase ads on order confirmation pages. Previously, Rob founded and led Social Method, a disruptive growth agency acquired by Power Digital Marketing, where he served as Chief Growth Officer, overseeing paid social, creative, and TikTok departments. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me back.
Thanks for having us, Mark.
Okay, so we're going to jump right in. This is an interesting opportunity, and we kind of talked about couching this as kind of the front end opportunity for brands and the back end opportunities for brands. So we'll go back and forth here. We've got 10 ideas for the listeners, 5 of which are kind of front end, how you can generate conversion rate optimization, increase margins, increase average order. And Rob's going to handle the back end. We'll go back and forth, and Rob will talk about ways that once you get orders to your site, the opportunities to generate incremental post-purchase revenues. So let's start. Number 1, we'll go to Ned. With this issue of tariffs that we're dealing with now, seems like a good opportunity for brands to be able to experiment with price testing, price modeling, good opportunity. So your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, you said it well. It's exactly that. There's a lot of brands out there, I think, we're driving on cruise control in a lot of respect as to one of the major drivers, obviously, and contributors to their growth strategy, which is pricing, price modeling, bundling tactics, et cetera. As brands start out, I think it's a little bit of a finger in the wind type of tactic, or it could be cost-based pricing, which, when you're an early stage brand trying to just achieve whatever margin is possible, it's understandable. That's how they start. But as brands evolve and grow and start getting into the, certainly high single digit millions of sales, decamillions, centimillions of sales, you start to see very clear patterns as to who the consumer archetype is. And if you can identify who the consumer archetype is, you can layer that up against other mosaics of data, understand how price elastic is that consumer, how reactive, for instance, are they to promotions? Are they discount buyers? Are they bargain hunters? Or are they at the other end of the spectrum that almost prides themselves in paying high prices for items, right? Because it tends to, give signals of exclusivity or really high quality, et cetera. And so to me, there's over the years, we've really kind of been beating the drum with a lot of clients. We've got to run price experimentation. We got to study who the consumer archetype is more. And I've noticed a lot of brands are measurably a lot more willing to have that conversation now. So if anything, there are some silver linings to all this, which is, a lot of brands are running interesting optimization and finding new threads of revenue unlock and most importantly, margin unlock via things like price experimentation. So yeah, I mean, there are some benefits coming out of this.
Is there something that brands need to be considering to be on the lookout for? Years ago, there have been companies that were doing price testing. They'd get called out by people. Hey, I saw your product for this price, and my friend saw it for that price. Anything that I need to be thinking about as a retailer?
Yeah, I mean, you've always got to be a little cautious with it. I mean, you're just running a straight A/B test sometimes isn't the route. Sometimes we'll do what are called baseline testing, where we'll do effectively comparative modeling, like before and after. That's totally acceptable. It is, generally frowned upon to be running, like for instance, a ABCD style model where you got all sorts of different variants of price points. If the prices are relatively close together, you're generally probably going to be okay with that. But you don't want to get into the crosshairs of the FTC or certainly any legal trouble. So yes, there are the right ways to do this, but oftentimes people will look at price testing as just a simple like, oh, I'll sell a product at $40 versus $50. And that's a very blunt way to look at it. There's a lot of other iterations to price testing that can be equally as impactful, not the least of which is candidly getting more into bundling, which is like if you buy two items, the unit economic, meaning per item might be less, but the contributed total margin of the consumer on like an LTV basis goes up. So in that case, you're actually ironically dropping the price in a way, right, per unit, whilst asking the customer for more money in totality up front, if that makes sense. So point being is there's a lot of different things you can do here. There's also a lot of threshold experimentations like unlocking. We're very encouraging of clients to get into gamification models. So the most classic one of those would be unlocking free shipping. Everybody's pretty aware of that, right? Oh, you have $100 card value, you unlock free shipping. Well, is $100 the right price point? As an example. And I've got a really interesting anecdote to share with you, as we go along here as to a brand that missed that target and saw double-digit hits negatively to their AOV and conversion rate. And when we were able to solve it, reverted that, which was a really fascinating case study. So point being is yes, price experimentation is key, but don't just look at it as like this blunt A versus B, $40 versus $50 type of thing. There's a lot of different ways to skin that cat.
Okay, great. And number two, let's go to Rob. So Rob, one of the opportunities, especially on the Shopify platform, but there's opportunities on other platforms as well. We'll call them click upsells. How to optimize. Maybe you can talk about what this means, but also how to optimize. What are the good benchmarks that we should be looking at to measure the performance of these kinds of programs?
Yeah, great. I mean, I think the one huge benefit of Shopify is they allow this one-click upsell after the purchase is confirmed. And what I found in testing with that, I actually did quite a bit of this before starting Uptick, is that brands can add 5 to 10% of total revenue by optimizing this post-purchase one-click upsell correctly. The reason why the conversion rate's so high is the consumer doesn't have to add their credit card again. It's not like they're going back into the store and having to purchase again. It's an impulse buy. It's like when you're checking out of the grocery store, you pick a couple items. So it doesn't affect conversion rate, which I'm sure Ned loves this part about it. It's all post-purchase, adds 5 to 10% of revenue, and that's if it's fully optimized. So I have a feeling like when I see most brands running this, like most everyone on Shopify is doing this now, but it's not optimized. So, think about the early days of, meta ads when people were running 5, 10, 15 ads. Maybe that's how much they were going live with a month and trying to optimize across those ads. It almost feels like the but now brands are doing hundreds of meta ads a month and trying to find that needle in the haystack that really drives up your ROAS. And I think that's kind of where this one-click upsell is. I think brands tend to pick a product or two, run it there. It's maybe a product that they want to sell or they have extra inventory, but they're not necessarily being creative and thoughtful about maybe they need to actually create a product for this one-click upsell space, right? And I think I find that the metrics that are showing you are fully optimizing this are one, you're probably having to test 20 to 30 upsells a month in that spot. And I think most brands are probably not doing it. Two is they should generate $1 to $2 revenue per view, which tends to be, if your profit margins are 25%, it tends to be a 25 to 50 cents, profit per order incremental, which then ultimately can lead to 5 to 10% improvement in your top line just from this one-click upsell. So it could be a pretty big driver that I think brands are doing, but much like website optimization, maybe they're just not optimizing it as much as they should.
I think it's a good one, and I think it's a good call. Oftentimes, it becomes defensive in that they're using product that they're trying to get rid of, as opposed to offensive, leaning into it with items that they know are at the right price point, items that match well with other things that they're selling. So yeah, that's a good call and good opportunity. All right, let's jump back to Ned and let's finish some of the thoughts on price experimentation. You talked about free shipping, you talked about bundling, other types of price testing and how best to execute.
Again, you can also get into some of the behavioral psychology of it too, which is using elements like price anchoring, right? So this is something that we've done with a lot of brands where you can, in some cases, bundle products together, or you can kind of show a more premium version. The classic kind of business school example of this, and I might butcher the anecdote a little bit, but it was like a Harvard Business School from the 80s, which was, I believe, it was like a bread maker that like GE was putting out. You probably all heard the story before. It was like a $300 bread maker. They couldn't sell it for the life of them. So some enterprising individual on the team decided to release like a $700 one. And interestingly, then the 300 started to sell a lot. And because people had a comparative notion, when they could compare it up to a higher, more expensive premium, it made it appear a lot more cost effective. And so you can use tactics like that. So obviously, this is highly contextual on what the brand is, but if you have a premium version, I've encouraged clients before, and we've actually even run tests. I know we did it on one brand where we introduced a premium line simply to make the main line look more affordable. And it worked really well. The sales went up dramatically. And even though they got marginal sales, if you were to just look at the premium line by itself, it didn't do well. Again, that behavioral psychology, that anchoring tactic actually worked really well to justify. So if you're in a position as a brand right now where you are being forced to, in other words, to increase costs, you may want to consider doubling down on this and literally increasing a even higher price premium model, right? To make your new, let's call it former product that's now in actuality more expensive, appear less so, if that makes sense. So again, you can get into a lot of the behavioral psychology here. There's also just general, price elasticity testing. There's sequential testing, there's running offers too. Let's not forget about that. One thing I'm noticing is a lot of brands doing right now with a lot of success is saying, we don't know. They're being very honest with consumers. We don't know what's going to happen, but what we can guarantee you is our price will not change for April and May. And that's having big impacts on sales right now. Now it's a little bit of a gamble, because if the tariffs don't come through, then you basically got the equivalent of like a BFCM, Black Friday, Cyber Monday sales pop for nothing. Like, you just got it, right? So you got this big revenue. But if the tariffs do come, now you've potentially got an inventory problem, because if you sell through too much of the inventory now at your current price point, then when the price point increases, you're in a cash jam potentially. So we'll see how this works out, but a lot brands can do right now to take advantage of sales today, and then also run different types of like threshold testing.
So I think what you're talking about is good, better, best strategy, which is something that many retailers do play in. And I am starting to see, we're recording this at the end of, well, I guess April 21st. There's lots of brands out there now that are sending emails out to customers about this situation and what their plan is to either hold pricing, increase pricing. And I've seen lots of conversation about your point about being concerned that they might be stealing dollars up now, pulling them up from the future. So we shall see. All right, Rob, let's go to number 4, third-party ads, one of my favorite opportunities.
Yes. So this was actually started really by the biggest e-com in the world, like Amazon. And I think they don't break down the revenue in this way, but it suggested that, 40 to 50% of the profits are generated from the third-party ads on their advertising platform. And so we've seen, the top 30 to 50, e-com sites in the world develop retail media networks, which are essentially AKA advertising, and basically following Amazon's path here as like this can be a huge profit driver. I think what I realized in starting Uptick is there was no easy solution for all e-commerce brands to adopt advertising as a profit center for their business. So the concept behind it is, I think the most lucrative spot to run advertising is on the order confirmation page. So, the user completes a purchase, much like the one-click upsell. It's not interrupting the conversion rate, but that user always gets to an endpoint. So in this case, it would be after the one-click upsell, where they typically are staring at the address they just typed in of whatever the home address is where the product's being sent, or in some cases, the post-purchase survey. And I think what we found is that is just a very high intent moment to show an ad because the user has just completed what they are there to do. All other forms of advertising are disruptive advertising, trying to interrupt the user to kind of bring them on your site. In this case, the user just completed a purchase. They've got their credit card out. They're on that purchase high, right? And they want to keep going. And so the intent is there. And so we're just really matching the user intent with a third-party ad, like from like an Apple TV Plus or a HelloFresh or a Disney Plus, to try to capitalize on that moment the user's in to essentially create a monetization opportunity for the e-commerce brand to monetize that user as they're on their way out of their website. And this is becoming, I think I mention this all the time, as the analogy is much like SMS marketing was in 5 years ago. I think the first thought of these brands is, wow, I would never want to run a third-party ad on my website. Sometimes there's that big challenge. But the reality is, one, these are non-competitive ads. The advertisers tend to be non-retailers. But two, is this becoming a more and more common practice, much like SMS marketing, then the brands are starting to make money from this. And the CMOs of the world are seeing this on other websites. It's just becoming more widely accepted. It's almost expected by the consumer in some cases. And so we're seeing a trend of brands who want to add post-purchase advertising to their website. It makes 30 to 60 cents plus in incremental profit per order. Uptick, my company, we built a website, we built a script that allows a brand to add it very, very easily. Usually it takes a developer a few minutes to add. It's not a cost center, so there's no cost to use Uptick. It's just a profit center. So brands can expect that 30, 60 cents per order. It's easy to do the math, easy to give them estimates. And a lot of times goes back into the marketing budget, goes back into the tariff budget, whatever it may be.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. One of the things I like about these opportunities is, you can use this to go to the bottom line and just add to EBITDA, or it can cover, added headcount that you might want to add, or it could, cover cost of dev work for, feature and function that you want to add to your site. So there's a lot of ways to use this money. So good one. Marketers, we all know that customer relationship doesn't end at checkout. Building a real and meaningful relationship starts after purchase. That's where Extend comes in. Extend's suite of post-purchase solutions keeps your customers happy and coming back for more. With Extend, retailers can set up custom rules and workflows to handle shipping issues, fulfillment errors, returns, and exchanges through a dynamic, branded experience, saving you time and money. Extend's integrated fraud mitigation technology helps identify and stop bad actors before they impact your bottom line, with no agent intervention. Extend also provides unique value-added services like product and shipping protection that can help you drive additional revenue while offsetting the financial risk of these various post-purchase issues. And best of all, customers love Extend. With a 96% CSAT score and 61% average boost in LTV, you'll have happier customers, fewer headaches, and more repeat sales. Visit extend.com to see how you can up-level your post-purchase strategy today. Number 5, Ned, let's go back to this conversation of descriptive statistics to help earn more margin. What does that mean?
Yeah, of course. So we're going to go back in time for everybody back to descriptive, statistics 101 class in high school or college. So there's a lot that we talk about with averages in e-com, average order value, right? Average cost per click or average acquisition cost, et cetera. We spend a lot of time there, but we're missing some of the other key descriptive statistics that actually tell us a really interesting story. And to tell you this anecdotally, we had a client that came to us, this is pre-tariffs, and they were basically in a frizzy being like, we're in a really bad spot. AOV has dropped double digits, conversion rates dropped double digits. We heard you're the CRO group to go to. Can you help us? So it was like, sure, let's start digging in what's going on. When did you see the dips? Okay, what did you do differently? One of the things that they had done is they said, well, we have a $93 average order value. So we made our free shipping threshold $100. Sounds pretty logical, right? When they did that, everything started to drop. So what we did is we took a look at the order distribution and we started model out over the last 90 days, 6 months, a year, et cetera. And what we found is they didn't really have a perfect normal distribution curve. They had this audience who was like an evangelical buyer way off to the right on the distribution curve who was buying $300 to $400 of this product at a time. So what does that do to the mean? It shifts the distribution curve to the right, and it created almost the false impression that your average order value, meaning it was the average, the median, or I'm sorry, the mean, yes. However, the mode, meaning the concentration of where the majority of orders lived, was 75. So if you remove this outlier audience, your AOV would have dropped dramatically down to 75. So the vast majority of customers were getting to checkout with $75 in their cart and seeing they needed to add $25, i.e. 33% to break the free shipping. They're like, I'm not going to do that. So what happened? That hurt conversion rate. That also hurt average order value because less people were intending on increasing cart value to unlock free shipping. So point being is you already see what we did. We dropped it back down to, it was like 80 or 79 or whatever it was. Boom, just like that, conversion rate, AOV, unlock. So the reason I bring that up is I understand everybody's trying to kind of jockey right now to be like, what do we do with pricing? But don't ignore some fundamental statistics that candidly rarely get talked about, like your mode as an example, or understanding the standard deviations to figure out what does your distribution curve look like of where orders live. And you might be able to manipulate things like free shipping threshold or unlocking a free gift or unlocking a discount or whatever, based on those more rounded descriptive stats to understand where would be the most impactful. Don't just lean on average order value.
I think you're pushing everybody to go to Chat GPT to start typing in the terms mode and median and how to figure
right.
all that out.
Exactly. It's back to stats 101, right? So yeah.
All right, good one. Number 6, Rob, you have some thoughts on post-purchase surveys.
So this is something that's become pretty widely adopted as it's a big measurement driver of essentially attribution for your media spend from all your different channels, almost like a triple check to see if people are hearing about your site from the channels where you're spending most heavily. It's become a pretty widely adopted practice. I think what I always struggle with, to be frank, and I get why it's widely adopted. I think that data is very helpful. But what I see most brands doing is showing the post-purchase survey to all of their users. And so if you have 100,000 checkouts a month, I don't think you need to, as I mentioned before, this is a highly monetizable moment where that survey appears. It doesn't necessarily meet the user where their intent is. It's helpful for the brand, but from a user's point of view, they want to keep buying, right? They don't necessarily want to take a survey. And so what I always thought was kind of the best solution is to continue to show a post-purchase survey, but maybe only show it on whatever percentage of traffic you need to show it on in order to get that statistical significance of the data you're trying to collect, right? And then on all the other traffic, so let's say that might be 10% of traffic, and on the 90% of traffic, run a third-party ad, right? That's a highly monetizable moment. And so sometimes if you try to stack them, especially if you kind of run the ad underneath the post-purchase survey or behind it, it typically doesn't work. So you basically use this space, this prime real estate, so to speak, to collect data. And I would argue that, you don't always need to be connecting, showing that post-purchase survey to 100% of your traffic.
That's a good thing. This is like, it's for retailers that have stores, they go through a lot of pain and effort to decide where to put things on the floor, how to get customers to navigate the store. I think you're talking about the same thing. And you've got, space on your site, making sure that you can optimize as much of that space as possible. All right, number 7, Ned, let's come back to CRO, conversion rate optimization, and why it's needed now more than ever.
Yeah, more just like holistically. I mean, yes, we've talked about price testing, but you kind of just said it right there, which is, brands need to use every tool in the proverbial toolbox right now to unlock revenue growth, gross margin expansion, LTV, CAC to LTV ratios, et cetera. And candidly, the most impactful thing that you can do next to diversifying inbound revenue channels, such as what Rob's doing, is optimizing your existing, right? Because it's the tide that lifts all ships. You're going to see an improvement on return on ad spend. You're going to see, again, increased CAC to LTV ratio. You're going to see better per unit economics, margin profiles, et cetera, on first, secondary, tertiary purchases. So we on average typically will see 20% ARPU lifts when we're running CRO for anywhere from 4 to 8 months, as an example. That alone for many brands is going to unlock the margin profile you need to make up for any tariff deficit you're going to see. Some brands can see even larger. Obviously, not brands that are exclusively reliant on China, by the way, but brands, and generally speaking, if you can unlock another 20% in terms of an average revenue growth per each incremental user without shifting budgets at all, I mean, that's enormous. So on top of that, remember, that's the average. We have seen a number of clients that have seen upwards of 40, 50. We even have one client that's over 60% ARPU unlock. They've got about 80 to 90 products in their catalog. It's a CPG brand, large retail establishment. I mean, that was a game changer. And granted, we've been working with them for, 2.5 years now, but that's a huge increase, right? So just generally want to kind of preach the necessity for a empirically backed experimentation program is critical now more than ever to unlock wherever you can revenue and margin gains, given the fact that you're going to get squeezed on the other end with cost profiles.
What can folks do, just quickly as an add-on here, Ned? In order to do this stuff, you've got to have some capability to do A/B testing and all. How can you spin something like that up relatively quickly if you haven't been, focused on that in the past?
Yeah, I mean, not to put a selfless plug in here, but an agency like ours, that's what we pride ourselves in, is bringing an entire unit to the table. So we bring a 5-person team as an example, designers, developers, data analysts, growth strategists, et cetera. So we can dive right in and execute A/B tests extremely quickly with a brand with full hypotheses and all data backing. That being said, if you're going to kind of do this the homegrown route, you're going to need a tool, right? So you're going to need an IntelliGems, you're going to need a VWO, a Convert, a Chameleon, a CRO lab. That's our branded internal tool at Power Digital. You're also going to need strong design chops. You're going to need strong development outside of your just general management and triage dev. And then most importantly is you're going to need what's called a CRO lead. You're going to need someone that really understands the fundamentals of consumer analytics, behavioral psychology, and how to run proper experimentation. It's don't just go run random A/B tests. I'm telling you, you're just going to go in circles. It's going to be very frustrating. There's a system and there's a process to this. So it definitely can be done. I'm, happy to give advice to anyone who's interested in building that at home. And of course, we can help them as more of a turnkey solution too.
Okay, great. Number 8, Rob. So this is something that, I've been talking about from the time I started in the catalog industry. Package inserts. This was one of your call outs. So how does a brand think about this?
Yeah, so it's the analog version of the post-purchase ad on the order confirmation page, right? So obviously when that transaction takes place, it gets sent to a warehouse or a 3PO. A lot of advertisers want to supply inserts and pay brands for every insert that they include in their order package. We see brands like Shutterfly, DoorDash, HelloFresh, Naked Wines are all big buyers of these. They tend to pay anywhere from, call it $50 to $100 for 1,000. It all depends on results, so that number can change. And then as you actively stack these inserts, then the response changes as well. So you can only go so far. Most brands can't put 10 inserts in a package and make $50 to $100 CPM on each one because the performance degrades, right? So typically, I think that sweet spot is like 2 or 3 inserts where you can get $50 to $100 CPM per insert, but it can add up. That can be another 25 cents or so per order in profit. But one challenge in some brands that I've worked with on this and kind of helped advise is that the 3PO, sometimes it's like, hey, any additional item packed is 10 cents, right? And so it doesn't matter if that's an actual product they have to pull off the shelves or if it's just a little tiny slip of paper that they have to put in. They typically have a hard line there. So sometimes, it doesn't work depending on the contract. Meaning if you have a 3PO, you have a contract with them, but many brands who are doing the fulfillment themselves are trying to make that work.
Yeah, sounds like you've been living inside my head because we've been having some of these conversations very recently. All right, that's good. Want to make your customer journey more valuable? Meet Ebo, an all-in-one loyalty solutions provider that helps brands build stronger connections and drive significant revenue outcomes. With Ebo's loyalty ecosystem, brands can build custom programs, including paid programs, engagement, and tiered experiences that meet customers where they are and take them where they want them to go. Ready to increase engagement, enhance monetization, and maximize revenue? Visit Ebo.com today. Ebo, one loyalty ecosystem, limitless growth. Number 9, leveraging average order value and unit per transaction to help find more margin, Ned.
Yep, of course. So we talked a bit about price testing. We've talked about some behavioral psychology. We talked about price anchoring, conversion rate optimization strategies. The other side to the coin here is, remember, even without changing pricing, you can shift the dynamics of what consumers are doing by encouraging to buy more than one. So this is the classic upsell, cross-sell, and or bundling tactic, and or, as you alluded to before, Mark, we do a lot with good, better, best modeling. I can't tell you how many times, especially with a highly consumable product, we've taken on a client, they sell their hero product, it's one-off, and they have one of those old school just quantity counters, which, by the way, no one uses, where it's just a little plus symbol and you add 2 or 3. When we gamify the experience and we basically give people a array of options, usually like a 1-pack, 3-pack, and a 5, or a 1, 2, 3, whatever, what we'll find more often than not is a huge amount of users will gravitate to the middle option, right? So when given that array of 3s, they'll choose the middle, especially if you highlight the price benefit to it, maybe the fact that it's most popular, what have you. And I've seen a number of clients whose UPT has gone from like 1.4 to 2, just like that, simply by running this type of gamification model. So there's so many different ways you can boost the average order value. If you've got a large suite of products, right? Say it's a nutraceutical brand, skincare brand, beauty brand. If you've got more than, I'd say, a dozen products, you can start getting into build your own bundles. People love and have such a strong affinity in almost this concept that when they build their own bundle, there's like a higher propensity for them to convert because they assembled it themselves. We've done this. I mean, this is one of the very first big growth levers that we pulled as of, starting the agency 7 years ago, 6-7 years ago. So a lot of things you can do there, from good, better, best modeling, site-wide gamification tactics, proper upsells, usage of intrusive interstitials at the right time, even things that I don't really like, which often work, which is like those gamified spinning wheel things that, brands will do. I try to avoid those. I just don't like them. I don't think they're great for the user experience, but I can't tell you, a bunch of clients have come to me showing me data. It has increased their average order value, right? When people unlock, some sort of like 10% off on orders over a certain value. So just don't discount AOV. I know we're really looking hard at price. We're looking hard at conversion rate, but reminder that you've always got this other ace in the pocket, which is your average order value and UPT, that if you can increase that, again, you're going to see a lot better margin, increase revenue total wise, not necessarily ratio, but total wise per customer.
Okay. And number 10, Rob, let's come back to post-purchase and membership and premium loyalty.
Yeah. So another way that we see brands monetizing that user after the user's made a purchase is, almost everyone has seen the white label credit card, right? So, there's credit card companies that will work with you to white label a credit card for your audience. That can be a big driver. Particularly if your audience is into credit cards and capturing them in a perfect moment. A lot of times you actually even see that pre-purchase, of like, hey, sign up for this credit card and take $75 off your current order that you have in your cart. That can be a little trickier. You probably need Ned and his team to run that experiment so it doesn't reduce conversion rate. But that can be post-purchase as well. I think you tend to have to be a bit of a bigger e-com site to be able to kind of create those partnerships with the credit card companies to white label their card, as well as there's membership programs. So, if you think about it, a user who's, checking out of a website, you have a good moment to offer them a VIP club of the website, or offer them some kind of benefits club that can allow for, future discounts, come back, every future purchase, you'll get 20% off or get free shipping on every future purchase. And you're essentially upselling that user to subscribe to some type of loyalty membership club. So all the metrics are very different on that. So it's hard to say what you can lift your business by some of those, but they are tactics that I see employed out there as well.
Both of you guys have had lots of experience and you've been practitioners and salespeople. I made a note while we were talking here because it was going through my head of what I've heard from brands. And I probably have said this in my life. We don't do that here. That's not something we do in our company. How do you challenge, a brand that, you're trying to sell them something or show them something that can be helpful to them, and they're obviously it's their brand and their opinion. But what's your comeback when they say we don't do that here? Let's start with Rob.
Yeah, great question. That does happen, and you would expect. As it relates to showing third-party ads, that sometimes is the objection. What I think that brand may have in mind when they're objecting to it is they might have in their mind a picture of an ad that's really disruptive, very flashy, very aggressive. I tend to go straight and say, well, take a look at a quick demo. And I want to show them the experience in the ad unit. This is a simple text-based ad. There's no animation to it. It's all text. It's very small. And so normally when they see that, it kind of disarms them. It almost doesn't even feel like an ad. It almost just feels like a message. And so they're like, oh, that's it? And you're like, yeah, that's it. And that can generate, 30 to 60 cents. So a lot of times I'll take the approach of just showing them the quick demo, and they're usually kind of pleasantly surprised about how well it fits into their order confirmation page.
Right. Ned, we don't do that here.
Yeah, I get that one a lot, right? So especially with brands that kind of call themselves luxury or high end or premium or what have you, a lot of fashion brands will say that. So one of the ways that I'll come back to them is say, like, you might be right. And if that's so, I understand this has been an intuitive thought you've had for a long time. Let's quantify it, because this is key, because you're going to keep running into this. And via running an A/B test, if you're right, now we'll know at what degree is this new feature actually detrimental, or worst case scenario, you might be pleasantly surprised to see that it wasn't detrimental. Maybe it was additive, right? And so to me, that's always a big one, because you don't want to be just running on hunch all the time. They very well could be right that, like, this gamification feature or this new navigation structure, right, that's more modernized, but maybe takes away from their perceived brand image. It's like, well, if that's the case, your virgin new user on the website who's highly, highly skeptical is going to likely be the one that's going to show you with their actions that you did detract from the branded image, and thus they are less likely to buy. We can find that out pretty quickly and then quantify it. So going forward, you can always use that as data to back up your argument, the client, as to why we shouldn't do X, Y, and Z with any group you ever work with in any domain. Also, it kind of brings up another interesting point too, which is just getting them into the mindset of experimentation doesn't mean you run it to all users. We'll do these like 5% audience tests where a very, very small segment of users will see the variant. So 95% never actually see it. And we can still, over time, with stat sig markers, quantify the impact. Quick side note, far more often, we see that it actually does win. Just FYI, when we propose something and they say, oh, that's not on brand. But that's a whole nother discussion to go down, is what do you do when it does win and they don't like it per se internally? It's another discussion.
Yep. All right, good stuff. Thanks for the 10 good ideas here. Appreciate it. I'm sure that the listeners will get a lot out of the suggestions that you've made. So thanks to Rob Jewell from Uptick and Ned MacPherson from Power Digital. Good to see you guys. Thanks for your time.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mark.
That's it. Today's game balls go to Ned MacPherson and Rob Jewell for coming on the Marketing Playbook. They gave us 10 really good ways to help drive more revenue for your business, but here are my favorites. Number 1, price testing. Ned offered up thoughts about experimenting beyond simple A/B testing with price points. Consider testing bundling strategies, free shipping thresholds, and price anchoring, where you can introduce a good, better, best strategy into your business. And number 2, Rob spoke about many ways to drive extra revenue from post-purchase advertising, post-purchase selling of premium loyalty and membership programs, and finding ways to monetize your outgoing packages. And number 3, conversion rate optimization audits. If you've not gone through an audit with a third party, now might be the time. Having a fresh set of eyes on your site might be just what you need to identify quick wins to improve sales. Even if you cannot get to everything, take 1 or 2, execute them, and then move on to some others. Thank you, Playbook marketers, for listening to another episode. If you want to check out more pages of the Marketing Playbook, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast spot and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Until next time, the devil is in the details.